introduce our presenter for the day. So we have Jay Blackwell, and he serves as the Director of Programs at Umoja Behavioral Health PC in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he continues to utilize his extensive background in public health, community development, organizational excellence by participating in several community and regional activities. He previously consulted with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in the Office of Minority Health and Resource Center. There, he focused on assisting underfunded and underserved communities and organizations. For the last 2 decades, his professional services in public health have included assisting his clients improve healthcare and treatment services to at-risk population. Jay is considered an expert trainer and facilitator in organizational infrastructure and resource development strategies and techniques. Now I will turn it over to Jay to present.
Well, thank you very much, Keisha, and welcome everyone. And thank you for this invitation to participate. I see that I had the sun on my side today, so I'm taking that as a good note because I do have some information that I am pleased to share. The introduction that Keisha shared, that pretty much sums up who I am. And today, I really wanted to be able to share and talk about not only priority setting, but getting your priorities funded. Because I think one of the things that I have seen across the country, and especially in tribal communities, is that there is a clear understanding of priorities already. It's actually quite clear. The thing that we are often struggling with is getting those funded. So let's go into the presentation. I want to encourage you that if there are any questions along the way, the chat is being monitored, and Keisha is going to be our moderator here. I also want to point out that there is a resource guide attached to this presentation. What I really struggled to do was to make sure that I could be able to work with you professionals with your current ideas and then see what you're going to think about that. I've tried to bring in some rather current, updated research, but also some practical information as well. And the resource guide is there to provide you links to all of the examples that are included in our presentation. So please join with us, hang in. I hope you're going to enjoy our discussion today. What I really wanted to be able to share is really a discussion about relationships, the relationships that exist between priorities and measurable long-term change. And this can be seen either in priority setting in either communities or organizations, tribal entities. Really having like 5 areas. As you can tell, I like to use my hands a lot. I like to move. So the first is communicating a clear vision. How is this priorities? How are these priorities connected to your mission and the messages that are supporting change? That means you already know where to go. The second area will be engaging the champions that are part of the change areas that you want to see in your communities. This involves the leaders and partners to achieve collaborative outcomes. And again, champions, that might be auntie, that might be a cousin, that might be your staff person in the front line. Champions isn't always about elected leaders. I'm telling you, I am so impressed with those of us who are willing to volunteer, because we are saying that we will be present and we will able to put our body right behind that message. And that's also a champion to me. So whenever I think about a champion, volunteers always come to mind. The third area would be strengthening capacity, infrastructure, and resources. The fourth area is about cultural values. And this is more so about, with where you are in your community, where you are in your organization, the values that you bring. I want to present some mechanisms for you to consider how to make sure with your current programming, is there coherence and is there contiguity throughout? And then number five is, of course, communicating successful outcomes and their value, because we can have these wonderful papers and reports, but if they're not actualized, and actualized means shared, actualized also refers to getting them funded, then they remain reports. They remain really great ideas, really valid and often supported ideas. However, it's not a priority unless it has a budget. So let's keep on moving. So there were these words, because and how. So we have a report. We have a need because of all the wonderful things he does, but then how do we get it moving? So because is the question mark and how is the verb. So this is about action. Public health priorities tell a story about need in a people or place or a setting. So of course we are trying to correct something, which means that this is a pressure. When pressures arise and cause intolerable imbalance in an organization, someone says this needs to be fixed. And if there were already resources there to fix it, we'd probably get it done. So this is when priority setting comes in, because there has been enough pressure in a people, pressure on the place, pressure on the setting. I talk a lot about outcomes. To me, outcomes are about benefits. And we can have benefits at an individual level. We can have benefits at a family, community level. There can be benefits to a building. There can be benefits to the environment. This is about need, priorities and needs. So one thing that I definitely encourage my colleagues here on the line to think about is like, how are we addressing outcomes? We have plenty of visions, but what about the benefits? Do we talk about how the benefits of these outcomes are going to impact our communities, impact our organizations, our entities, or is it just about the report? Because when resources are finite, solutions require an intentional approach to successful outcomes. And this imbalance is leading to priority setting. So today, what I'd like to be able to do is, this is one of the first places that I thought I would start. This PHCPI, the Primary Health Care Performance Initiative, this is actually something that was brought together by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They were working with UN and WHO. On the international level, they brought together public health professionals from across the world and said, when it comes to the priority setting process, what's important, what do we see, and what does this mean at the local level? And I think we should always maintain a focus at the local level. And at the local level, realistically, priority setting is complex and inherently a political process. We can't get away from that. There are politics involved, because one of the things that I know from capacity building is that when I've asked an agency, well, what needs to be fixed? What needs to be corrected? What's out of balance? First, agencies will say everything. And I say, oh, well, we don't really know how to start with everything. Do you have any priorities? And that's where the discussion begins. So the political process of priority setting probably means that there are several linkages across the page, several linkages across the community, several linkages that need to be touched. And that political process has to be addressed. And it says that we're going to be involving diverse stakeholders, decision makers, actors. These are all things that you already know. The part that sometimes needs assistance is in this piece where it says a clear process that is focused on the use of evidence, transparency, and participation to identify the most appropriate programs and interventions to address population health needs. That's the part where we often need some assistance. That's the part where we often like say, well, is it a clear process if you have more rights to talk than I do? And that's an internal decision. But let's go on and see what this PHCPI is saying about the priority setting process. They were able to provide and really look at a generic approach to what ought to be going on, what you ought to be seeing when it comes to your priority setting process. This is around healthcare, and this is what we focus in as well, is in healthcare. And healthcare involves some very specific shareholders. We have our community, we have those providers, and then we have those others that are in linkage but are responsible, for instance, transportation. You know, you can't really think about transportation we can't really think about healthcare without thinking, well, transportation is like a link to how I can come and go. Transportation is like a link to how I can stay healthy in my community and how my community is connected. We don't all live close to each other all the time. So that's just one example of how a non-health sector impacts our health in real time. We don't really have the luxury of like only staying in the dentist office and saying only dentistry is the way to good health. We can't really say only HIV prevention activities are the only way to good health. We are an intersectional community of people. That's just how we are. But we have our diverse shareholders. We also have to be able to get information from each of these three areas, look at them, look at their feedback, and then do some analysis. We go through this prioritization exercises, and then a ranking occurs. Generally, this is how most agencies, organizations, people, families kind of approach priority setting. Of course, this is on an international level. Let's look at it more at a more tribal level, more realistic level. You're going to see this slide again. When I initially saw this proposal, this communication, I just thought it was brilliant. So I keep going back to it because in one glance, I can tell a lot about the focus of the priorities of this health center. I can tell what they want to focus on, how their community is being. I just thought it was such a beautiful representation. And again, I just want to point out how priority setting can look like anything, but it needs to be understood by more than just one branch. Like, do you remember we had community? We heard from community before, we heard from our healthcare providers, and we also heard from our non-healthcare providers. This is a wonderful representation to me. Most people can understand the graph when they see it and they give it nice colors and it's really presented well, but the words, oh my God, the words really grabbed you. They're able to really delineate, this is our mission, this is our vision, and we'd also like to communicate our core values. So just as a plan or a summary representation, this is a great start. But let's keep on because I think I wanted to share these like 5 parts about priorities and not only how to really understand how they're supposed to support change, but also how to get them funded. Again, to me, it's not really a priority unless there's a budget associated with it, but that's my bias. So as we talk about priorities, this 5-pointed approach that I like to just reiterate with my colleagues, please start thinking about 1, your communications, 2, the people that are involved, the folks that are actually being touched. The number 3 would be the leadership concerns. We'll share some information and examples about supporting leaders and what leaders really need to know when it comes to priority setting. We will address the importance of cultural values and also shared outcomes. And like I said, I'm trusting in the professional abilities of the folks that are listening. So what I'm really hoping to provide today are some places for you to go, some examples, and then some really usable links. In the chat box, you're going to be seeing the resource guide and all of the samples that I'm providing right now. We have a link, we have active live links to them. This just talks a bit about priorities and priority setting, about clearly shared priorities, because we have to be able to define change. We have to be able to define need. One of the things that is always helpful in the priority setting process is the definition of terms. Public health means one thing to one person than it does to another. Behavioral health might mean something differently to me. I work in a behavioral health agency. Does that include community health? For some, yes or no. So your definition of terms are very important. Please remember to include that so that you can all be talking around the same type of vision. Also, there needs to be some type of discussion about how these needs were elevated and became a priority. So what do successful outcomes look like, and who's going to care about them? Again, outcomes, as you'll hear me say more than once, can be about benefits to a person, a family, a system, a tribe, a community, a building, or an environment. Outcomes are about benefits. So we want to know that these are successful benefits. Okay, and why does need to change? Why does this need to change? What existing environmental situations have to be addressed to accomplish change? What level of change are we talking about? Is this immediate? Is this acute, or is this chronic? Are we able to measure if there's going to be any type of a difference or not? What about the consequences of meeting the need, and how is this need linked to you as a professional, you as a division, you as an agency, you as a tribe? How can we define the you and the change and the need? So again, when it comes to priorities, I think I'm really trying to talk about defining your terms and really saying, well, what are we trying to change? Agencies, tribal entities, tribes, individuals, all those folks that are impacted by an outcome, we become some of the indicators. We become the creative elements of where change starts. Agencies will look at change. Is this an internal or is this external? What's trying to change? Where are we trying to change it? I've provided some different examples of internal structures and external. Internal would be a tribal leaders within or across the organizational departments, community tribal concerns, key shareholders, or just the tribal capacities and internal capacities. Suppose we want to have a priority about being a better entity, being a better agency. We have to strengthen divisions. We have to strengthen communications. We want to be able to strengthen our own internal structure. That's an internal infrastructure. External, of course, would include other people's priorities. So do internal priorities, and where do the internal and external structures overlap? And that area of overlap, are we able to find money for it? Is change, or are there pressures only happening here, or are the pressures happening elsewhere across our environment? So these are different places and ways to look at it. Again, coming back to the Yellowhawk Tribal Health Center Strategic Summary Plan, I thought that they did a great example of capturing some of these internal and external, and then putting it out so that whether you are part of an internal structure or an external structure, you're still able to understand how you fit into their plan for health and how you can enjoin collaboratively in an area that is appropriate for the talent and skills that are on the table. Next, let's talk about engaged participants. We have a couple of pictures here because we are a whole community. So when it comes to engagement, what types are we talking about? Well, there are individual collective responses. Everything has to be systematically analyzed for useful data and direction, because it's that systematic part that funders are really excited about. Today, when we think about engagement, we have to, we're in a virtual world because of the pandemic that we are experiencing, our neighbors are experiencing, our country, the world. This isn't local, this is global. This is probably the second global pandemic that we as a community and our countries have had to really address in the last, 3 decades. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, HIV and AIDS is another global pandemic. It started the change of how we engage ourselves and our partners differently. So again, how is your priority setting historically informed? Because we have virtual, we have in-person, we have anonymous collection activities. How are you able to inform the history and the importance of who you're speaking with and how much money you put aside for it? Here's some other examples. Here are some other examples of engagement that we can talk about or can be addressed within a priority plan. Financing development efforts, speaking with your members, council leaders, town halls, community meetings. These are ways to systematically collect data. We can do that through all types of ways. We know that as professionals. It's just that, after we collect this information, even from our sometimes friends and allies, what do we do with it? Well, I happened to find a great little resource that was written in, I think it was 2013. I think this is when this was put out. This is from a professional. He was in the Northwest right before he retired. He's been working in tribal communities, I believe, all his life. Before he retired, he said, I'm gonna spill the beans. I'm just gonna let everybody know how to where all the money is hidden, where all the pockets are hidden. Because after you finish talking to and start collecting all this data from the community, you've got to find a way to share it. You got to find a way to address it, look at this systemically as a whole, bring this before the council, bring this before the leadership, and see how can we figure out to strategically pay for all of it. So he did this in 2013 and put it together. And as I started going through some of the information that Mr. Goodell had brought together, it was current. Even from 2013, his ideas were spot on. Probably as time changes and administrations change, many of these offices will no longer be present. But for the moment, this is a really great resource. And again, it's called Strategies and Methods for Tribal Economic Development. It is written in such plain language and such clear, clear communications about how to take your ideas and who to speak to them with in these different divisions. A lot of tribal funding is based upon government funding. Some of it is discretionary. Some of it is statutory. Statutory means that it has to be spent. Money that the government has legally set aside has to be spent. And many of the locations that Mr. Goodell has pointed out are linked to statutory funding. Very, very great strategies. So the idea is to take a look again at who you've been talking to and then figure out how to get it funded. Engagement, when you're really looking at engaging your communities, these are the things that we receive. These are the things that we benefit from systematic and planned activities. We can really support our shared values. We're really able to address environmental concerns over time. Traditional practices and historical references are clarified. We have programs for our elders and our youth, health and wellness, community events. The one bullet, well, there are a couple bullets here that I think are really great, but resiliency in times of stress or sadness is really important for communities to prepare for, because we are always under stress. We're under stress with the pandemic. We're under stress with climate change. As we're evidence, many are being impacted right now by climate change now with the weather. So engagement, priority setting means that we look at who we are and what we're trying to change, our legal definitions. And don't forget the fun. People, I should say, professionals often don't like to talk about how we get ill, which is sometimes through our fun and our partying. We need to be honest about that and see how are we able to prioritize our health and safety in even defining what is fun. Let me keep on. Let me keep on, see what we got here. The next area, priorities that are associated with leadership. And again, everybody is a star. When we have our leaders, and there are so many different types of leaders because we need different types of leadership. We can have leadership at the political level. We can have leadership at the community level. We can have leadership through volunteers. And like I said, everybody's a star. And when this is true, how do we support our stars? Because we look up to our stars. We just want to make sure that when we look up, there's something that we're getting back from them. So I'm here to talk about sustainability. I'm going to keep it good. I'm going to keep it focused. Leadership excellence. Now, this little graph on the left, where it has all these little bubbles in them. This is from the UK, and I just thought it was pretty cool. They've had a long time to figure out. I won't go. Okay, they've had a long time to figure out what leadership means in working with other communities, and these are some of the areas that they brought out to demonstrate an example of leadership excellence. And what I liked about it was that it broke out so many things to think about. We were able to think about, as the leader, how do we support our leaders in tone setting, coaching, self-management, decision-making, having courage. The relationships and power relationships are so important, especially when it comes to not only kind of knowing who your community is, but knowing how I as a leader, how I as a volunteer, how I as a parent, how I as a spouse am able to support others as part of getting things done. Innovation, must have it. Planning and vision. These are all things that we expect from our leaders. And when it comes to, supporting our leaders, that's like really important. Leaders are sometimes don't have the benefit of only being able to think about one thing at one time. For instance, in public health, sometimes they have like kept us in silos. Well, we can only talk about HIV today. Oh, well, I came here for the anti-smoking meeting, and someone tell me where to go for that, because smoking and, smoking cigarettes in a non-traditional way, and HIV certainly don't have any correlation, do they? Behavioral health, do they? So our leaders, even though our leaders have to be broad, overarching. Sometimes leadership means focusing, but sometimes leadership also means, like, what's the big picture? So here, when we are looking at priorities, and again, I'm going to say priorities and budgets. When we look at priorities and getting them funded, these examples here that I wanted to share are from active campaigns that I felt were able to communicate with depth and also with purpose. The Seneca Nation Transportation Safety Plan is beautiful. It is short, it is direct, it has a great listing of all of the partnerships, the communities that are involved. It's simple to read. The pictures were really great as a presentation plan, as saying this is how our community can work together to stay safe. It was beautiful. There are the Tribal Public Health and Environment Health Think Tank. This priorities in tribal public health. This was done in 2018. This is again a summary document that is beautiful piece if you want to inform some of your leaders about what you mean by public health and how different activities work together to impact a community. It's a great piece of informed literature, rather recent, 2018. You know, it takes about 2 years after doing the research. There's the implementation that tends to be about 2 years after. So I was so impressed again with many of the discussions and the presentations about environmental and realistic healthcare pressures on tribal communities and in tribal communities. An example of that is the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women Network services. They are partner with USET as well. This as a priority, we have to be able to work together with purpose to ensure that our community is able to sustain itself in integrity. Wonderful information, how they're able to address priorities and talk about them, present them in a meaningful way, but also in a way that is long lasting, is just classic. It's beautiful. And again, the last blue, the blue image is from ITCA, the Intertribal Council of Arizona. And in it, they take a look at what community health means and how, again, you can really speak to and inform your leadership, from your volunteers to your elected leaders to your auntie to your cousins, about how all of this stuff is connected. And how we expect to work with and hear from all or as many parts of community as willing to work with us to figure out what is need and where change kind of needs to go to, because we can't do it alone. We don't have the people power, the money power, or legislative power sometimes just by staying alone. So we have to depend on allies. And again, this is a wonderful way of training folks where they are in the process, in this process of priorities and change. So I'll keep on moving. I don't want to keep you long too late, because when it comes to getting the word out and particularly supporting our leaders, we need to be clear about how to inform our leaders. Practitioners and policymakers can be reached by news media, social media, issue policy briefs, one-on-one meetings, workshops, and seminars. Our policymakers, practitioners, many of us are practitioners here. We like to talk to one another. We like to be able to go back and look at our references and see if those references are really on time, and then what that means. In this whole thing about communication, you'll see message, source, audience, and channel. So when you are looking at the next steps to your priority setting, messaging, your message is important. The source, where does it come from? Your audience, who do you want to receive your message? And the channel, how are you getting the message out to them? Now here it says upstream and midstream indicators of impact include changes in public perception or awareness, greater use of evidence-based interventions and changes in policies. This is when you know that you're activating your plan correctly. Going to keep moving. I think this is number 3 bullet. We have like 2 more areas of priority setting and getting these funded that we really want to talk about. So I want to leave time for questions as well. So let's go on and talk about cultural values. So for cultural values, it's the thing when we have all of these words: cultural competence, congruence, is it traditional, is it not, is there resonance? You know, the folks on the call, you're the experts around what you have. The concern is, how do we use it in a way that will fit within our community? So here I have an example of an outline that SAMHSA has put together. See, and it says in this, says culture. The term culture is defined as a product of a shared history, and then it kind of goes on and on and on. But in it, this is about how behavioral health services for Americans and Alaska Natives needs to be probably more accurately attended. That there are the providers, there's the administration, then you have the researchers, but you also have cultural perspectives in health from the east, the south, the west, and the north. SAMHSA, this particular approach, we have a link for it in the resource guide. It took a long, I think this is the one that Pam Jumper Thurman helped put together. I think this is the one, or there's another one, but it is absolutely beautiful up in there. I'm going to move on. These are others. You know, one of the things that are always important for any community, for any organization, as you look at your own culture, as you look at what is being addressed, and for programs that are trying to come into your community, or programs that you want to see work with your community. How does it work here? You know, just because it came in from the UN, just because it came in from, you know, Western Washington State, very happy for them. How does it work here? That's why I love these 2 specific documents. Again, short, clear, flexible, and yet specific in communicating information, addressing change, and really taking to task the ideas. I've seen a lot of agencies do a lot of haphazard activities and then call it a plan. And I understand that that's a way of getting things done. It doesn't always result in measurable change, but it does make the providers feel good while they're doing those activities. When you look at having a program that that has some fidelity to it, anywhere along that way, you can say, this is how it fits within our community. This is how it supports our values. And we are very clear about the type of change that we are hoping to impact. And that is fidelity to a program. That's also fidelity to change. That is also being clear about how you want to interact with your community. And this is part of what culture does. Culture says we have an intentional way of being a people. We have an intentional way of supporting life. And when these priority setting activities are being implemented, please take some also time to see if how this innovation is appropriate to the setting and the environment and the peoples that you want to work with. And these are great tools that can help answer it. Like after you get your plan together, you can just like drop it into here and do some review, and then kind of take it from there to see what is our next implementation steps really going to look like. So let's go on, because we have about shared outcomes. And you know how I love outcomes. Outcomes can be to a person, a family, a community, to the tribe. It can be to a building. You can have shared outcomes, benefits to a building or to an environment. I mean, who cares if there's such a thing as a youth center? who cares if there's a elder center? How could that possibly benefit anything? Oh, get real. Of course you might need it, because we will always have a complete community. And in a complete community, we have shared values. So when we talk about our outcomes, we want to like make sure that we are able to communicate this well, not only the message, but our streams, how we choose to do that. You know, when it comes to outcomes, when it comes to agendas, priority setting is an agenda. When it comes to that, we always want to be able to communicate success. Because why go through this entire process? Why spend all this valuable time if some of these shared bullets on the screen really haven't been attended to? Why put a plan together if people don't understand how it's important to them? Why put an agenda together, these priorities together, if it's just going to be on paper and I can just like look at something, but you know, we'll never do this because we can't afford it. Demonstrated and inspired leadership. How does this plan, how do these priorities that you are putting together really show that you are listening to the people, that you are listening and to the change that is trying to occur? And again, how are we being intentional about discussing change? You just saw this slide. That's because I wanted to really reiterate, when it comes to getting the message out, when it comes to talking about benefits, when it's talking about collaborative outcomes, we have a lot of different ways to do that. There's a telephone, there's one-on-one, there are issue briefs, policy briefs, social media. The more you share your success, the more you share your intention, the more likely you are to find a partner who's willing to help you to get there. You know, this link is for those researchers. Right within Nashville is Vanderbilt, and there's a Vanderbilt Institute for Clinical and Translational Research, Victor. Amazing toolkit for free. For free, it has guidelines, strategies, checklists, worksheets, templates, everything from CBPR, community-based participatory research, to, like full out plans, talking to researchers at several different layers. Do you remember when I mentioned this is all called translational, because you're trying to translate what happens in the researchy area onto the sidewalk. So going from the walls, going from the reports into the communities. Translational research takes about 2 years. So what Vanderbilt has done is so if you have like 2 years, a lot of priority plans or settings take about 2 to 3 years to implement. If you've done any of this, if you have the pleasure, benefit of like working with a college or a university, to please go here. Check out some of the free things that they have. Toolkits to disseminate aggregate studies, toolkits to do working with individual study participants, to disseminate your products, to developing your plans. It's really great. And in case you're not a researcher, then hey, it's done up anyway already. From the Tribal Epicenter in 2013, his report, Best Practices in American Indian and Alaska Native Public Health. For those who are interested, again, it's like, what happens when you know information? Who do you share it with? How do you connect it? How do you show that this is an integrated approach to health? This is an integrated approach to change. This is an integrated approach that needs each of our voices in order to be successful. Because, given the choice about how I can live a better life, most of us tend to say, I might pay attention even if I don't want to hear it. I might. So these were the things I really wanted to be able to share today. I hope that they have been helpful. Just wanted to give an overview of what it means to not only have a plan, but to get that implemented, to be clear about the plan that you're putting together, look at your words, and also to encourage you to check out the accompanying resource guide. And at this point, I think I'll turn it over to our wonderful moderator, Ms. Keisha, and then she can see what we do from here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jay, for an excellent presentation. Like he said, that I did put the priority setting resource guide in the chat, so that is available. Are there any questions for him, or if you feel comfortable, you can unmute your mic and ask him, or just some comments that you may have?